This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Roadshow with your boys here. You can call me Truck, and once again, I am inside of a truck. A little dark out. It is nighttime, cold as shit out here in Chicago. But we are back anyway. I'm joined as always by the infamous Shane O'Mac, and today we're talking Week 16 fantasy football playoffs round 2. Hopefully, you guys won last week, and if you did, we're here to point you in the right direction to get you into that championship game. But nonetheless, we got some great games this week. Shane, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Like last week was probably one of the more fun Sundays of football watching. We had like 7 in the morning window or the noon window, 5 in the afternoon, and part of that 5 was that massive Bills-Lions game that just
was
fantasy
awesome.
Points galore, the fun to watch. So it's going to be hard to top it this week from a game standpoint.
I mean, 100%. I mean, the NFL is just getting better and better, and last week was awesome. A lot of stuff happened last week. David Montgomery, he's not officially on the IR. It sounds like they're trying to get him back by the end of the season. Also, I heard Aiden Hutchinson might be back for the Super Bowl if the Lions make it there. I found that interesting. But, yeah, man, if you have Jahmyr Gibbs, you are just salivating. Finally, you get a game without David Montgomery, who's a durable running back, and now you get to let him feast on the Chicago Bears defense. I don't have any Gibbs in any of the teams that I have left, but if I did, I'd be feeling good right about now.
Yeah, I immediately went and checked all my leagues to make sure I wasn't facing a Gibbs team this week. So luckily I am not.
Yeah, I haven't looked yet, to be honest, and I'm really hoping I'm not. So we'll see how that goes. But anything else in the news cycle that you think is noteworthy? Nothing really comes to my mind.
No, nothing big besides obviously the big one. If you were starting Kirk Cousins, now it's Michael Penix, and maybe that's a positive for the receiving options of Atlanta. So
yeah, maybe we talk about him later on in this episode. We'll see what happens. But before we get into it, guys, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, and let's get right into red light, green light for Week 16. Shane, who is your red light quarterback this week? Who you pumping the brakes on? Talk to me.
Okay, so the first guy I'm going with is Jordan Love. Now, listen, it's a great matchup versus New Orleans at home on Monday night, but it is solely based on 2 things. One is pass volume. So, it has been 6 weeks, I looked, since Jordan Love has had 30 pass attempts. He hasn't scored 15-plus points in 2 out of his last 4 games. Then we look at the matchup, right? Playing the Saints, it's a great matchup, but I think it's going to be like a bad matchup if you have Jordan Love as your quarterback, because with Spencer Rattler at quarterback and no Alvin Kamara, it looks like, I just don't think this New Orleans team puts up more than 10 points. And this is like Josh Jacobs getting 30 rush attempts, and it's just an easy game where there's hardly any throwing in the 3rd and 4th quarters.
Yeah, I agree with you. This Packers team's a good team, and right now the way the Saints are playing, it is just real bad. So, the game script points to Jordan Love not having a big game because he's not going to need to. So, I completely agree with you putting him on your red light list. That makes a ton of sense. My red light quarterback for this week is Brock Purdy taking on Miami Dolphins. Last week he just looked bad. Right. I think 2 out of the last 3 weeks, he's, quarterback 30 or worse. This Miami Dolphins team is really, really good. They're the 2nd best team in quarterbacks or points allowed to quarterbacks. It's just a bad matchup for him, and he's been playing bad. So I just wouldn't want to be trusting week 2 of the fantasy playoffs on Brock Purdy. I think there's much better options on the waiver wire or on your bench, hopefully.
Yeah, it's been like, it was the snow game and then the rain game, but still, it's been a while since we've seen him go over that high mark of, over 20 points and have a big high. I think
it was against my Chicago Bears. He had a good game against the Bears. So, it hasn't been looking great for Purdy lately, and I'm very worried about him going into this week.
Yeah, me too.
All right, did you have any others you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I think one other one I think that we mentioned him last week, but I would try to get off CJ Stroud still. Like, if you're still hanging on hope, it's not. But I think the one that more people are going to be starting that I would also be wary about, and that's Kyler Murray. And I think it's similar to the Jordan Love narrative. Like, I think this is a game where, based off of the Panthers allowing over 200 yards rushing a game over their last 5 games, this is a James Conner feast where it is going to be like all of the points are put up mostly through rushing. There's not going to be very much passing. And Murray himself, I think it's been 7 weeks since he's thrown more. He's had one game in his last 7 weeks where he's thrown more than 1 touchdown. He's not putting up great passing numbers. He's not rushing very much. So I just think he'll be limited because of the game script.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, CJ Stroud is he's just not – you can't start him right now. So I agree with those points. Very, very good of you to mention those. But let's move over to green light quarterbacks. Shane, who do you like this week? Who are you putting in instead of those guys that we just mentioned?
So I'm putting that he's going to be my QB5. He's going to be a top 5 quarterback this week, and it's Baker Mayfield. I mean, I was really, really impressed of what he did against that good Chargers defense. 4 touchdowns. It was almost 300 yards passing. I was really impressed with what they did. And this Dallas defense, over the last 4 weeks, they've allowed their 20 fantasy points they're allowing to quarterbacks. And that is taking in the down game of Bryce Young last week against them. So it has been higher before that game. So I just think they are on a mission to they're going to be put up big points. And a lot of it's going to be through the air, I think. So he's going to be like my QB4, QB5 this week.
Yeah, he's a smash play this week. I completely agree with you. If only we made the second round of the playoffs in one of the leagues we have him in, he would be in our starting roster. But sadly, we did not make the cut. I agree with you there. But my green light quarterback of the week is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers taking on the Rams. He is at home. He's coming off of quietly his best 2 games of the season. Last week threw for 3 passing touchdowns. The week before that, over 300 passing yards. He's been playing good. And again, I mentioned it last week and the week before, his days are numbered there. So he's trying to make the most of it, show on film that he can still play and be efficient in the NFL. So I like him again this week. He's taking on the Rams. The Rams are a bottom 10 defense against the pass. And, he's playing at home. I think the Rams are going to score points, and the Jets are going to as well. I think this is going to be a sneaky good game. And I'm be fine rolling out Rodgers in there in the starting lineup this week.
Yeah, I agree. I almost had him on there. The other real guy, real quick, if you had to, I'm going to mention as a streaming option, if you have not great options, I'd start him over some guys on the Thursday night. You can take a guess.
Is it Cooper Rush?
No, it's not Cooper. I was looking at that matchup a little bit more. Tampa Bay has been a little bit better against the pass lately. I was taking into account their overall season numbers when I first was thinking about Cooper Rush. This will be music to your ears. I actually kind of think I wouldn't be surprised if we see a decent, good game from Caleb Williams.
Oh, God. I am so done with Caleb Williams.
I know, but I know. But hear me out. Have you seen the amount of starters that are on the IR for Detroit? Their defense is decimated. They just lost a safety and they lost Carlton Davis, their best cornerback this week.
Also, I'm shocked that you didn't mention Jared Goff as your red light quarterback this week.
Yeah, I do have
very shocked.
Cold weather Goff, that is very concerning for me. Let's not forget about what he did in Detroit on Thanksgiving against that team. He really came back in that second half. I think he ended up putting up 25 fantasy points in that game. So it's just a sneaky thing I have that he could have a sneaky good game in there.
Look, if you're in the second round of the playoffs and you got to start Caleb Williams, I feel bad for you. It's not the worst play. There's other quarterbacks out there that are worse for this week. So I understand what you're saying, but I hope you're not in that position, who's ever listening out there.
I
get what you're saying. I'd be fine playing him. Watching him being from Chicago, it's just been so frustrating. and hearing all the slander on him and whatnot. It's been just very demoralizing throughout the season. So, but another guy that I wanted to mention that is a dark horse play this week, and I am honestly considering starting him myself. It's Michael Penix. Okay.
Oh.
The Giants are a bottom 10 team against the pass. They're not a great defense. And Michael Penix is coming out there. I just personally believe that they're going to try to get him some confidence early on in the game. He is their guy for the rest of the season. Whether he does good or bad, he's staying out there. They're not going to – you can't sit Kirk Cousins, start Michael Penix, and then if Penix plays bad, sit Penix and start Cousins. You can't go back and forth like that. So Penix is the guy the rest of the season. They're still fighting for a playoff spot. So I personally think this is a good matchup for him, and the team's going to try to get him to build chemistry with the receivers early on. I love Drake. He's got great wide receivers. He's got great running backs. The team is good around him, and I think we've seen enough good throws from him in the spurts that he's came in that I'm be confident putting him in. And it's a pure upside play, right? It's something like, hey, you never know, man. This guy could go off for 300 yards and 3 passing touchdowns in a good matchup, and come out with a splash in the NFL. So I'd be willing to take that chance. If I'm projected to lose the matchup, I don't want to go with a risky play, or I don't want to go with a safe play with a high floor. I'd rather go with the high ceiling kind of explosive play.
Okay, so let me ask you 2 real quick what ifs. Michael Penix or CJ Stroud?
I'd be going Michael Penix over CJ Stroud.
Okay. All right, Michael Penix or a hobbled Patrick Mahomes in that same game against the Texans?
Oh, man. Against a hobble. A hobbled Patrick Mahomes isn't really a hobbled Patrick Mahomes. He gets it done still. So I would probably go Patrick Mahomes over Michael Penix personally.
Okay. All right. So there, I just wanted to draw kind of a line for everyone listening to this. There's where Penix is kind of coming in at. If Stroud and Mahomes.
If Mahomes is playing, I'm not expecting him to be hobbling through the plays. You know what I mean? Sure, at halftime or whatever, he's going to be limping and he's going to be, favoring the ankle and stuff. But he just puts on a show. Okay, So, all right. Well, let's. I think that's about it, right, for green light wide quarterbacks. All right, let's move over to red light running back. Shane, start us off. Who you pumping the brakes on?
I am bumping the brakes on, and it's a tough call in one of my main leagues between a couple running backs. But I think I'm going to bench Rico Dowdle, despite what he has done the last 3 games.
He's been a good running back lately.
He's been great. I mean,
how many games in a row over 100 yards?
3 games, and he's been I think averaging 20 rushes a game over those 3. He's been looking good. But man, this is a really good Tampa Bay rush defense led by Vita Vea. Over the last 3 weeks, they're only allowing 66 yards rushing per game, which is second best. They're top 3 in fantasy points allowed, fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs over this time. Also, I was looking, they held Chuba Hubbard to 43 yards rushing. They held McCaffrey to 40 yards rushing. And then I think this is also just a game where I was talking about Baker Mayfield. I feel like Tampa Bay probably gets up by double digits in the second half of this game. And so that's going to lower that rushing attempt volume of Rico Dowdle on Monday night or Sunday night. Yeah,
I mean, it scares me because he's been so good lately, right?
Yes.
But the Buccaneers is a great run defense. So, the Cowboys are just leaning on Rico for the majority of their how to move the ball. So I understand your pause. And I would be hesitant of starting him as well. But it's hard to, he's been so efficient. So that would be very difficult for me. But I understand where you're coming from. My red light running back of the week is Brian Robinson Jr. For the Washington Commanders, taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are one of the best defenses in the NFL right now, arguably the best. Over the last 5 weeks, they are giving up the fewest rushing yards. I think they're the second best in points allowed to running backs on the season. And Brian Robinson, he's been a good running back, right? 3 of the last 4 weeks, he's been a top 24 running back. 21 carries last week. I'm really worried about him and this Commanders team. I feel like the Eagles are going to assert their dominance against the runner-up in the division. This Eagles team is a train wreck, or a freight train, so to speak, not a train wreck. but they will cause a train wreck for the team coming on. So, yeah, Brian Robinson is someone for me that I would be actively looking to put on the bench this week.
Yeah, they are so stout up the middle. I mean, that is their strength. They are really good there.
Yes, definitely. Did you have any others you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I want to mention two others real quick. One on a normal play, Najee Harris, Baltimore defense. That is the stay away game.
Oh, yeah.
Allowing the fewest rushing yards per game this year. And then also Najee's the last couple of weeks have not been very good production. He's rushed for a combined 67 yards in the last two games. Last time when he faced Baltimore, he went for 63 yards. And then last week, Jalen Warren the last 2 weeks, Jalen Warren has outsnapped Najee. So last two games, he's been outsnapped. Then real quick, I just want to mention, this is more for DFS if you're playing that side of things, because I can't imagine you've got the bench people to bench him for, but I would not be playing Joe Mixon in any DFS games. Listen, I tweeted on November 21st, if you thought you were going to be in your fantasy playoffs, trade Joe Mixon while he was the running back number one because of the fantasy playoffs. And we've seen it. I've seen it come to fruition now. Last week against Miami, he was held to 22 yards rushing. He's been held to under 30 yards rushing in 2 out of the last 3 games. Kansas City allowing the third fewest rushing yards per game this year. And next week he's got Baltimore, who we just talked about. So, like I said, you don't have probably a bench person to put in a normal playoff game, but DFS, don't put him in that lineup.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's a tough matchup for him. And then also on the other side of the ball, I'm staying away from Isaiah Pacheco. You just can't trust him in your lineup. I know since he's been back from injury, you've been wanting to, shove him in there, but averaging 13 carries a game for 45 yards, you can't trust that in the playoffs. And especially against the Texans defense, who give up the 4th fewest points to running backs on the year. So that's just, a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And unfortunately, I have him in the league, and I am struggling as to figuring out who to put instead of him because I'm not excited about his play this week.
No, and they still, last week, Kareem Hunt got the same amount of rush attempts as he did. It was a 50-50 identical split.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, did you have any others you wanted to mention?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, we'll move over to green light running backs this week, and I'm going to start off, and I'm going to keep it short and sweet. James Conner. Okay, you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
I you know how much I love James Conner.
You do.
And
yeah.
I was looking at his schedule early on in the season. I'm like, man, when he plays Carolina, when he plays Carolina in the playoffs, I am just beyond excited. Bricked up for James Conner this weekend against Carolina. And then as a dark horse, I talked to you and Mike, in the Slack. Something about Amer Abdullah just tells me hey, if you're in a bad spot and you need to fill a flex spot, there's no one on the waiver wire. Amer Abdullah's sitting there. 7 targets last week, 7 catches. Now I know Aiden O'Connell's back, but in the 2 games with Aiden O'Connell, he still had 3 and 5 targets. The defense he's playing, remind me real quick, Shane, if you could.
They're playing Jacksonville. They're playing Jacksonville.
Yes, Jacksonville. That's right. I had it in front of me and then it went away. Mm-hmm. So Jacksonville has given up the most receiving yards to running backs. So I personally, Amer Abdullah thrives in the passing game, and Aiden O'Connell hasn't played much football this year. So something is telling me this is a gut feel guy of the week. Amer Abdullah, possibly, if he gets 6 catches for 40, 50 yards, you're in a good spot with your flex there. So, break glass, start Amer Abdullah.
What you have to hope for, what you have to hope for with him is that kind of maybe Jacksonville gets up, because that's where his bread and butter is made, is on those receptions. I don't think
Jacksonville played good last week too.
Yeah, they did. They put up some points. So that's what you got to hope for. I mean, they put up points and got up on the Jets, which forced the Jets to throw a lot. So that's what you hope for.
Yeah, and Amer Abdullah can score touchdowns too. He's got quite a few on the air. So, but yeah, those are my quick hitters for green light running backs. Who you got, Shane?
Okay, I got 2 guys that are going to be a little bit down on the ranking list that I think if you needed to plug in, if you got iffy guys, or if you want to put them in a flex spot. Number 1 is going to be contingency based. So number 1 is Tjae Spears. If we don't see Tony Pollard, which I think there is a better chance this week of maybe not seeing Tony Pollard than we have before, because all last week he didn't get 1 practice in. He played in the game, but then he had to leave the game because he re-injured his ankle. I don't know if they don't hold him out this week, maybe because of that fact. So we saw Spears put up 27 fantasy points in that game last year, a lot of it through the air. But if there's no Tony Pollard, now he's getting a really big high touch volume against a Colts team that's given up the 6th most rushing yards per game. And they're bottom 10 as far as receptions allowed to running backs this year. So I like him if there's no Tony Pollard for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah, that's just tough. Let's move over to green light.
Let me make my second guy real quick.
Go ahead.
Jerome Ford. This is a guy I think you could plug in for sure this week. We got
I do
Nick
like
Chubb.
Jerome Ford.
Yeah, Nick Chubb is out for the year, so now you've got a high floor of touches for Ford. He put up I think it was 18 fantasy points against that Chiefs rush defense that we always go on about how good they are. So now he's facing the Bengals, who give up over 125 rushing yards per game. And then, like I was looking in weeks 1 through 4 when there was no Chubb, 3 of those 4 games he was over 10 fantasy points, including one game that was 18. So I just think that is a safe floor if you need it as far as putting into your spot this week.
Yeah, I like that. I like Jerome Ford this week. I think he could have a big week. So something just tells me about that one. But let's move over to wide receivers, Shane. Red light wide receivers. Who do you not like this week?
I have to bench him in a couple leagues, and I'm going to do it. I don't like DK Metcalf. I feel this is one of those guys where you got to get away from history and name, and you just don't make him an automatic start on your team. Like, let's look really at what is happening. So his last 4 games, 9, 10, 5, 8, 6. I mean, he's been single digit fantasy points in his last 4 games. And then, like, over the last 2 weeks, he's only gotten 6 and 3 targets. It's been since week 3. Since week 3, he's only had 1 top 24 wide receiver finish on the week. This is JSN is the number 1 guy there right now. And now you're going to have Ken Walker back. And so you've got him. He's going to take away some probably touches. I just look to get away from him.
Something tells me he's just going to go off this week. I mean, Minnesota's pass defense is terrible.
They're bad.
So
it's
a good matchup for DK Metcalf. And, this Minnesota's defense, Brian Flores, he schemes up a really good defense. So something tells me he's going to be taking JSN out of the game, although it's very hard to do. And we could see a resurgence from DK Metcalf. But I understand why you wouldn't want to start him in the playoffs. The guy's been absolutely terrible lately. But my red light running wide receiver for week 16 is Michael Pittman. Now, Michael Pittman, last week he didn't have a bad game. He had a decent game, right?
Yeah.
But I was looking, as scrolling through Twitter, I saw a couple funny updates of stats for Anthony Richardson. I don't know if you've seen these as well.
No, but I'm sure there is some.
All right, so Anthony Richardson has the worst completion percentage in a season since 2011. Now, Shane, let's play a little game. Totally random. I don't know if you're going to get it. I'll give you a couple seconds to think. Who is the quarterback in 2011 that had a worst completion percentage?
Okay, so I don't know.
He's a name. You would recognize the name.
Okay, so I may be going too far back, but my guess is going to be Tim Tebow.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding. Tim Tebow had 46.5% completion percentage, and Anthony Richardson at 47. So he's been bad. Also, another tidbit: Anthony Richardson has the second worst inaccuracy throw rate of any quarterback with 250 attempts since the year 2000. He ranks 776th out of 777 quarterbacks. So, look, this is just bad all around, okay? And I'm just not starting Pittman. I'm not willing to do it, and you can't make me do it.
When Coles hears this portion of the show, if he's listening, because I know he would listen to it, he's just going to put his feet up on the desk and like hands back and like, yeah, I know.
Yeah. He said it from day one. This guy he's not accurate, But I mean, you look at Pittman, 6 catches, 58 yards, over 7 targets in each of the last 4 weeks. Like, he's had some production, and I just don't want you to think that he's going to be that you should be putting him out on your team. That's all.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I would start like a waiver wire pickup like Jalen McMillan over him, honestly, given the last 2 weeks. So,
yeah,
the other guy, speaking of bad quarterbacks, the other guy, I mean, you're going to need to bench, even though he's been great the last 3 weeks. And I will admit I've been completely wrong on him the last 2 weeks, but I'm not starting Jerry Jeudy this week. Like, now that Dorian Thompson is going to be the quarterback, like, I was looking in, I was digging into some of his numbers last year when he's played, because I was looking at picking up the Bengals defense. Like, it was bad. Like, the 2 games he started, he had 125 yards, 150 yards throwing, 4 INTs, only 1 touchdown, and only 50% of his passes he completed.
Yeah, that's
so
not great.
Put him on the bench.
Yeah. All right. Are you all good? You move on?
Yep, I'm good. Yep.
All right. Let's move over to green light wide receivers. I'll go ahead and start. Yep. And this is my ex-best friend, Jakobi Meyers. Okay. Aiden O'Connell's back. I like Amer Abdullah. I like Jakobi Meyers. I like Brock Bowers. I like the Raiders to go out there and put up some points against this terrible, terrible Jaguars defense. But Jakobi Meyers, we've talked about it in weeks prior. You guys understand this guy has been a whole different wide receiver this year ever since Devontae Adams was traded. 11 targets a game. This guy's been an absolute killer. And I'd be willing to put him out there this week as well. Is wide receiver 2, flex spot, whatever it is. I want Jakobi Meyers on the squad this week.
Yeah. I think that to change back to Aiden O'Connell really helps him. That's a big lift.
Yes. Yeah. So that's an uptick in my book. Good enough to start him this week.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a couple guys. I originally had JSN, but I'm like, hopefully everybody is already starting him, so I'm not going to mention or go on about him. So the first guy I just briefly mentioned, Jalen McMillan. I like to pick him off the waiver wire and put him in as a wide receiver 3 or flex. Listen, last 2 weeks, he's 18 fantasy points a game. He's averaging. In those last 2 weeks, he's seen season high in targets and yardage in both those games. Like, Baker is looking to him. As we see a decline in Cade Otton's stats, we're seeing the bump up in Jalen McMillan. So I think that's something to go ahead and keep. We'll continue to see with him. And then second, you might find it hard based on what happened last week. But I would go back to Adam Thielen. I know it was a little bit of a down week. We expected probably more against the Cowboys, but he still saw 25% target share. There's no Xavier Legette. He's going to be out, so you get him on a higher safe floor and catches. And then all throughout the year, Arizona has struggled against slot receivers as far as fantasy points allowed. So I wouldn't be afraid to go back to Thielen in a game where they're probably trailing most of it.
Yeah, and I'm surprised you didn't hit the more than a Thielen.
I know.
Like I gave in the last stream. Yeah. That was brutal, Shane.
That's why I saved everyone. That was a one-timer.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Fair enough. All right. Well, let's move over to tight ends. Talk about some red light tight ends, and I'm gonna just, I don't have anybody that I'm red lighting this week for tight ends. Instead of pulling someone out of my ass, I got nothing for you for red light tight ends. If you got a tight end, there's not many that I would not be starting this week. I'm just rolling them out there and hoping for the best. So, Shane, talk to him, tell him what's up.
I'm going to make up. I'm going to make up for you not red lighting somebody. I'm going to give you 2 guys.
That's why we're a team, Shane. Yeah, that's why we're a team. Okay,
tag team in. All right. So, first one, I would try to bench Pat Freiermuth. Like, I know you're going to look and see he scored 2 times in his last 2 games. But listen, it's the last time he faced Baltimore, he was held to 2 catches for 21 yards, so 3 fantasy points. Not good history against them. And then the second guy that I would stay, it's going to be very hard, but I think there's somebody you could plug in and play over him, is I would be hesitant on Mark Andrews. I think when I was looking, the stat I saw, and I can't remember who to credit to, last 10 meetings that he has faced the Steelers, he has not scored a touchdown. And if you look at all of Andrew's good games this year, it's only been because of when he scores. It is not because of catches. It's not because of yards. It's when he scores. And we have a pretty strong sample size of 10 games of him not scoring against this defense.
Yeah, that's fair. But I appreciate you coming in clutch for the people, for the roadies, giving them some red light tight ends. But Shane, I know this is your favorite part of the episode.
It is.
This is your dig deep streamer tight end of the week. You came out with some gems last couple weeks. I mean, just absolute daggers. I couldn't believe it. I'm watching him on Sunday. I'm like, holy shit, he's on point here. Grant Calcaterra scored a touchdown when you mentioned him.
Stone Smart last week, 10 points.
Stone Smart last week, getting 10 points. Who is on the list for today? What gems are you dropping for the roadies this week?
All right, I'm going to give you two guys, and I think the first guy, I think you could start over the red light tight ends I mentioned. So one is Brenton Strange from the Jaguars. So he had a great week last week. Obviously, everyone saw Evan Ingram's out for the year. He logged, I think it was 85% of the snaps. He had 11 catches on 12 targets. But then also, like, I was looking earlier this year when he started, I think there was 5 games when he started, and like 4 of those games he was a top 10 tight end, which I was shocked about. I don't remember this happening early in the year. So there's more than just a 1-game sample size with him. So that's one guy for sure I would pick up off the waiver wire, and I wouldn't be afraid to start him over Andrews or Freiermuth.
Yeah, Brenton Strange, I couldn't believe it. When I saw last week, I'm like, did he really have that good of a game? I didn't really watch that game too closely, but he really did. So I've been seeing in all my leagues people picking him up this week. So I think everyone's on that same radar as you. Brenton Strange is a good play this week.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you have any others?
Yeah, the other guy I go with is Okonkwo. I mean, I think
what was his name?
Yeah, Chig. We're just gonna say Chig.
Chigoziem Okonkwo. The way you said it was funny.
I know, it's like my Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, Terry McLaurin.
Listen, I think two things are helping him out. Like we saw, he got a great target volume last week. 10 targets, he had 8 catches for 59 yards. If you're looking at streaming tight ends, like high upside guys is what I like, and so he's got that big play potential. It was a couple, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago when he had like the 85-yard touchdown catch and run. So he has that. Mm-hmm. I think the switch to Mason Rudolph helps him for sure. That offense plays better with Mason Rudolph. I think probably he is will be the number 1 or the number 2 target person in that game this week against the Colts.
Yeah, it's just such an ugly team. You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine relying on Chig Okonkwo and Mason Rudolph in the fantasy playoffs. But yet we are here. And if you're in a bad spot, it might not be a bad play. So sometimes you got to risk it to get the biscuit. You know what I mean?
That's right.
But yeah, that about does it for our week 16 red light, green light plays of the week. We appreciate you guys very much. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, hit us up throughout the week on Twitter. If you guys got any questions, any specific related questions, we'll help you out. Season's almost over, and it's almost time to talk about the draft. I'm already getting excited. I know I'm in a couple leagues. I had two leagues that are into the next round of the playoffs. Shane, did you have any lineups that are still alive?
Yeah, I've got 3 leagues that I'm still in round 2. So
oh wow,
that's good.
Good on you.
So good on you.
Okay, and then best ball update. Coles and I we're still talking about doing a best ball episode about what we learned this year. Sadly, with our 100+ teams that made it into the playoffs, we're down to 4. We're down to 4 lonely teams, and we need a miracle this week. And I'm praying on it. So we're still alive, but just barely hanging on. So look out for our Sunday live stream. Join us every Sunday live at 10 a.m. here on YouTube and Twitter. Make sure you guys come check it out and talk some football with your boys. other than that, you guys are the best. Hope you guys win your matchups this week, and buckle up.